Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of Delegate Corner. I'm your host, Sinkas, and today I'm going to be chatting with Gunnar. Gunnar is the founder of EthernautDAO and a very familiar face in Optimism governance, as he's a delegate, a member of the Grants Council, and the regular host of the Citizens House call. Let's dive into what he has to say. Hello, Gunnar, and welcome to Delegate Corner. Glad to have you on the show.
Glad to be here.
Amazing. All right, so let's begin with a quick intro to yourself and your background. So whenever you're ready, just take it away.
Okay. I studied game design and architecture. I worked in the fiat world for 18 years, and in 2020, I founded EthernautDAO with the Ethernaut, who is a dear friend of mine.
All right, and how did you actually join into crypto before founding EthernautDAO?
So in 2020 lockdown, I had a free time, and crypto kind of piqued my attention. I consume Bankless podcasts mostly, and just bought it. That's how I started.
Yeah, similar to me. I started a bit earlier than the lockdown, but in lockdown was what really started getting me deeply into the space. And how has your crypto journey so far unfolded?
I think the standard, from bad trader to fundamentals to core values. Uh, Started wanting to be rich in 1 minute, and I ended up wanting to add value to the ecosystem, basically.
Yeah, that's one amazing thing about the space is people join for the money, but some of them do see the value behind the money and the financial gain to be made, and they tend to stay. So that's really great. And
Yeah, it gets you into your skin,
yeah, definitely does. And what are your interests in crypto in general? Like, do you have an interest for? I assume DAOs because you're in Optimism governance and all. But what else besides DAOs?
Well, I don't feel I have like a fixed interest, like an expertise in the space. I feel I have an advantage because of how much knowledge I can incorporate on a daily basis. Uh, I I always like to be the dumbest person in the room and get all my knowledge questioned. It's healthy for me, and that's my expertise. Being capable of shatter my knowledge and quickly put it back in a better and more aligned way. Um, and all this alignment goes to adding value to the ecosystem, as I said before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to be like that myself. I like being the dumber in the room and just learning from my peers. That's amazing to see. And what brought you to optimism in like specifically?
EthernautDAO back in the days needed a place to live, and mainnet was too expensive, and for a non-profit that's like a huge limitation. Back then, you needed to be whitelisted in Optimism, and the Ethernaut, the guy that funded EthernautDAO with me, was working with synthetics, so he was already in, he was already whitelisted. That's how everything got aligned. And half a year later, Optimism launched public goods, and EthernautDAO was a perfect fit for that.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's a I see it as you mentioned, like a perfect fit, very aligned, that brought you to Optimism. But after coming into Optimism, what made you get involved with its governance?
Well, we had everything deployed in Optimism, and since then I felt I had to protect the ecosystem somehow. That was providing EthernautDAO a place to live. You don't want your place to live to fall down. So when Optimism Public Goods came out, it was like a call for me. I grew up in a small town with one public hospital, one public school, one public gym, and so on. You didn't have to pay to have health education or practice any sport. And in fact, some of my schoolmates could have breakfast just because it was available at the school, you know. That gives you some perspective on just how important public goods are.
Yeah,
So it
definitely.
was a call to action for me.
Yeah, I can imagine that, and especially I think public goods. A lot of people in the space tend to have public goods in their mind in terms of open source projects, but in reality, a lot of the
Mm.
things around us are public goods, and it's important to highlight that both inside but outside of the space as well. All right, and then you became a delegate in governance, and we see a lot of things being difficult when it comes to being a delegate. What would you say was the hardest thing about being a delegate in regards to tooling or communication, you name it?
Mm. Um, well, at the beginning, keeping the conviction that the time that you put in there will sooner or later be rewarded. Not like getting paid, but more as being very proud of how far the collective has advanced and knowing the small things I contributed to. That feeling is not there when you start, but you kind of wake up one day feeling proud, and getting there is it's hard, you know. There are many tools being built as we speak that will lower the work volume in the near future. And I think right now communication is the hardest, even if you are good at writing, and engagement means people putting time into what you just wrote. Uh, I'm I'm starting to understand that readers read if they expect something in return for their time, you know. And this something in return does not mean alpha only. Some people read to learn, others to be informed, and alpha is good too. You know, when you communicate, you need to keep this in your mind. There's nothing worse than reading a long text and thinking, "What a waste of time." You know, it's going through governance and have that feeling. You lost that reader almost forever. So the last communication resource you have is memes, and even good writers suck at that, you know?
Yeah, no, memes are the communication tool of our generation, I would say. And I
Yeah.
think I'd love to see more memes in governance. I think we tend to get all serious about governance, but at the same time, it would be, I think, beneficial to have some more laid back approach with to some memes and just kind of like break the ice a little bit. Um, all right, and diving a little bit deeper into what means to being a delegate, what do you think are some of the core values that a delegate needs to have in order to, do their job well?
Hmm. I'll say patience. We are trained for instant things, and governance is a human process. Uh, Keep a high moral bar, turn off your ego, learn to publicly own your mistakes, and avoid wasting everyone's time on something negative, you know. I love when people reach out with novel ideas and they want feedback, even if it is the dumbest shit I ever seen, you know. Uh, on the other hand, I hate gossip. It's good to know if someone didn't follow the rules, but that's it. I'm very connected with my emotions, and every time I feel negativity, I kind of disappear, you know. uh, a core value is a positive alignment for me.
Yeah, definitely agree with the values that you mentioned. And going more into the more practical, granular things, what were some of the successful practices or best practices a delegate could follow in order to be more successful? Think in terms of like some delegates maintain a delegate communicator thread, others are, participating in community calls. What are some of the practical things that you think can help a delegate be successful?
I think mind alignment is one of those. Understand that there's a human on the other side. I always write imagining myself in front of the person that I'm talking to when I post something in the forum. This helps a lot to keep a civilized conversation. Then I'll say for delegates, go participate in both governance and citizens call. Many members of Optimism Foundation are there talking about the last news and answering questions, which should be a priority for every delegate. Look for, I think you always have to look for ways to bring more people in. I'm constantly thinking, how can I facilitate integration?
Yeah, very, very insightful. And I do agree, like you have to be active as a delegate just because of the sheer volume of information. For example, mission proposals, right? So many mission proposals in so little time, so much to
Yeah.
dive in. So yeah, just be available and be present and attending calls and whatnot. I do agree, although I'm not a delegate myself, I do agree that it can really be helpful. All right, and going into decision making as a delegate. So I know a lot of people are interested in how delegates make their decision, especially the people that have delegated tokens to them. So how do you
Hmm.
approach decision making? Do you have a set framework, or how do you work to that end?
Um, well, I think it depends on the season and the objective that we're looking for. Uh, I always start thinking myself if the project that I'm analyzing is a good candidate for RPGF, you know, that it's a huge filter, especially when you can't know if the project will be impactful or not. And then if they have KPIs, then impact is kind of easy to spot. Then you go more into technical stuff of that project, but first filter RPGF for sure.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think in my quest to bring this proposal to life, Jack Anorak, which I requested feedback from, kind of like had the same approach. He said that, despite supporting the idea of a podcast, he thought that it's a better candidate for RPGF, which I too agree, especially because it's something that you can measure its impact ahead of time easily. Big
Mm.
discussion I had with Lee in the forums about that as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely agree, or rather understand the way that you filter things through that lens. And all right, apart from being a delegate, you're also on the grants council. So can you tell us a little bit more about how that came to be and how do you approach your work there?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I've been on subcommittees before the Grant Council. Nothing fancy to tell about it. I just sat down 4 to 6 hours every day and work on giving proper feedback, you know, going deep into each rabbit hole or proposal that you get. I kept building EthernautDAO at the same time and push as many builders to Optimism as I was able to. Uh, so you might feel no one knows all the effort that you are putting in, but then you get elected and you realize people saw you. That was a big thing for me when I got elected for the first time in Grants Council. It was like, hey, people people is voting for me. What's going on?
You see your work being appreciated, which that's
Yeah.
from financial incentive. I think that would be the top incentive and reason to do something is
Hmm.
appreciation. All right, and so we talked about being a delegate, we talked about being on the grants council. Let's take a step back and look at optimism governance in general. How do you see its state like as it is right now? What are some areas that you think we're strong, and what are some areas you think we're lacking in terms of governance?
Well, I think today optimism governance is it's fun. It's in a high experimentation state, and I like it that way. Um, I think the balance between token holders and the ecosystem interests is one of the strongest things. This bicameral thing that we're experimenting on. Uh, and I have to say that optimism governance is very strong on having many experienced people too. You have many governance OGs from different protocols who bring a very in-depth knowledge about governance. Um, I don't think we are lacking anything, to be honest. I don't know. Maybe a centralized place for comms where you can understand everything that it's happened. Some sort of newsletter for every optimism thing that it's happening, because it's a lot, you know.
Yeah, definitely a lot of information going on, and I think that's kind of like why the role of the forums, but there's a lot of
Mm.
noise in forums as well, and some people, I don't remember the name, but there is somebody in Optimism that does this weekly review.
Yes, very
Appreciate,
helpful. Shout
yeah,
out to him.
yeah. Well, I'll tag him. I don't remember the name right now off the top. I'll tag him in the Twitter when I announce the episode. All right, and you did mention that the state of like governance is kind of like very experimentative. Where are some areas, if any, of course, that you think we could experiment even more with?
I'll say delegate compensation for those that are kind of outside a council or an alliance. And for delegation activity, we need token holders to redelegate, you know, or give active delegates more weight on every cycle. Um, I think that's why it's missing, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I think I've talked with Charlie from Agora about like delegate apathy or inactivity.
Mm,
Yeah, I think compensation or some sort of incentive would, on the one hand, be a good incentive to bring more activity, but at the same time, it's kind of like a double-edged sword where you have some
yeah,
other issues to come, like CBILs and whatnot. So yeah, definitely something we could experiment more with. I agree.
that's why it's called experimenting, you know. We,
Mhm.
we we won't get it on the first time, but we'll get there.
Right on, right on. And in terms of practical tools or features, like for example, Agora, since I mentioned Charlie, do you think there are any things that would help us or help delegates and governance overall?
Well, I'm responsible of bringing chambers to the Grants Council. They applied for a grant on our first cycle, and I got to meet the team. Chambers, it's a Notion meets Web3 tool with a permeable team hearing your feature requests. So it's an amazing tool that needs more attention right now.
Mhm. Awesome. And now, in terms of successful things that Optimism Governance have done has done, think RPGF, request for proposals, or the missions in season 4. What has been like the most successful in your regard?
All of them, to be honest. But you need to have context for every program the OP Collective put out. You know, it's very easy to praise RFPs or RFGs program now, but we needed all the governance history and mistakes to get there. Uh, Grants Council for me is by far the best, in my opinion. Uh, but I get to know that because I see how it works on the inside. You know, I hope we can share that process more openly in the future to the public. But it's a great process for grants. You know.
Yeah. And is there anything that you think could be better?
Hmm. I think coordination is getting way better at every step. The quality of the products, the projects, and the teams is far higher too. Um, Reach, I think could be better. I still talk to builders that don't know that we are looking to fund them if they have something good or and they can avoid VC pressure or a revenue model that breaks what they are creating, basically.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
we need more reach.
yeah, I definitely feel you on the reach side. I too was only directed to Optimism missions through Voni, which again, shout out to
Hmm.
Voni. for the podcast because I wasn't aware of that happening, right? And I was actually interviewing for a position at the foundation, and that's how they kind of like directed me to the mission proposals for some of like areas that where I could contribute my time and effort, basically, which is
Fun fact, Bonnie was one of our first mentors at EthernautDAO.
Mhm. Yeah,
Great person to me, to be honest.
absolutely agree. All right, and is there anything from those programs that you would change?
The main language. It's so hard for a non-English native to express myself properly. But that's on me. I should go to an English training, to be honest.
No, I think a lot of things in crypto are English by
Yeah.
natively. A lot of Spanish. Like last episode, I was talking with Romina from Seed Latam, and they have like a
Hmm.
huge Spanish community, Spanish speaking community around the world, which is also amazing to see, and a lot of Chinese communities. But I think smaller countries, especially like I'm Greek, and there's absolutely no content in Greek from big. So yeah, definitely would be something helpful. All
Yeah.
right. And where do you see the Op.DAO like 1, 2 years in the future?
1, 2 years in the future, I expect to see a consolidated and inclusive process capable of filtering impactful funding.
Hmm. Love to hear it, but are there some challenges to get there? And if any, what are the hardest in your opinion that we'd have to overcome to get there?
I think the hardest is civil resistance needs to get better, basically. We have an attestation station and I love it, but that's for people with history on their backs and multiple attestations. We need to be able to quickly distinguish new users from bots and farmers, people without history and chain that wants to join.
Yeah, I think WorldCoin is doing something in that regard with like proof of personhood. Please
Mhm.
don't crucify me for mentioning it, but I've been
No, no, it's fine.
yeah, I've been reading up about it a little bit and discussing it um, with like internally at the L2Beat team with Bartek, who has some good insights to share on the code. I'm not a technical person myself, but yeah, I found it rather interesting what they're trying to accomplish. But yeah, if anybody wants to learn more, just do your own research on that front.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't done my own research about it yet, so I don't have a strong opinion about it.
Yeah, I was on that board as well. Still don't have a strong opinion, but I'm
Yeah.
beginning to get like some disinformation out of my head and replace it with actual
Mm.
facts. So that's a good
Hmm.
starting point. All right,
Yeah.
and going back to delegates, because this podcast is about helping other delegates be heard and not only spotlighting current delegates, but also helping with the discoverability of smaller delegates. Is there any delegate in your mind that hasn't, in your opinion, received the love that they do, that they deserve, in terms of voting power?
Mm. So many. I've been working with Sid Latam lately. They are putting a lot of effort, uh, and that's, I think, the lowest delegate I can think of, to be honest.
Mhm.
But they are a group, so you have many uh, people that are delegates there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely are. And yeah, I talked with Ramin already in the previous episode, but I think we'll get Joxes in the future as well.
Mm.
So
Great guy.
I agree, absolutely.
Hmm.
And speaking of getting people on the podcast, is there any guests that you'd like to see in the future episodes of the podcast?
Hmm. Um, I'll say Jack Anorak. Uh, he's always pushing me to rethink my ideas. You won't be happy with what he says, but the value that he gives, it's always huge. Uh, I lately crossed paths with GFX Labs working in the council. I think it's Paper Imperium, and he has a macro view that I can't possibly conceive. Great guy to expand your knowledge too.
Mhm. Well, if they are listening to the podcast, there's an open invitation to both of them to come on the podcast. I will definitely reach out. I've already been chatting with Jack about it, but we need to find a time to do the recording. And with GFX Labs, open invitation, but I will reach out to them as well. All right, and is there anyone in the Optimus Collective, from delegates, builders, council members, foundation employees, that you'd like to give a shout out for their work?
On the top of my mind, I'll say Lavanda for sure. I don't know how she's on top of everything all the time. Shout out to Jonas. He's also part of Optimism Foundation, and he's always answering any question that I have. Dane, the Grants Council lead, great guy to work with. Katie Garcia for being always open to help. She has sent many approvals to many missions, and it's always there to share her knowledge.
Much love to all of them. Great,
Yeah.
great shout outs. All right, and Donna, we've reached the end of the episode, so I'd like you to show us a place where somebody could learn more about you. Do you have a Twitter or something else that people could follow you?
Um, I'll say Twitter. Yeah. I post everything there. It's GonnaEth, like going to it all together. GonnaEth. Uh, so yeah, that one.
Okay, perfect. I'll drop it in the description as well so people can reach you easily. All right. Well, Donna, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really appreciated your insights and your knowledge. So just really looking forward to continue seeing you in the Grants Council and also as a delegate.
A pleasure. A pleasure to have been invited here. Thank you for the time.
Absolutely. And thanks everybody else for tuning in.